Welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And here we are in Rochester, Minnesota, Med City, home of the Mayo Clinic at the Lotus Health Foundation Symposium and Gala. And I am joined today by a fellow weight loss champion, someone who has lost an incredible amount of weight and is also the living proof and embodiment of a phrase that we heard recently on the show, that health is not always linear. With that, we welcome Tania Lyon to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Chuck.
Like so many guests that come through to look at you today, I would never know that you had a health struggle, let alone a problem with your weight. You look like the perfect pillar of health.
Well, that's very kind. Yes, I struggled with overeating, binge eating, and obesity and morbid obesity for more than 4 decades of my life. So I can't remember a time when I didn't feel obese in many ways.
The question I get asked a lot, and maybe you got this too, is, for me, it was like, how did you get up to 420 pounds? Like, how in the world does somebody ever get in that position? Do people ask you that a lot as well?
Yes, I do get questions about that. I also get a lot of discomfort around telling my story because I have centered binge eating in it, and people aren't quite sure what to make of that. And at least in my closer realm of friends and family, who would be the ones who would ask that, I would get asked something like that more from an outer, as someone who doesn't know me,
right,
as opposed to someone who does. But yeah, I do get that question quite a bit, and it's really quite easy in many ways because it really becomes about the instincts that we have around our hunger drive. And it's not about the number, it's about what food does to me when I have the wrong foods and what food does to me when I have the right foods.
Give us an example of what happens when you have the wrong foods.
Well, when I have the wrong foods, what happens is that my hunger drive is completely dysregulated, and I call it going on the prowl. And so the foods like ultra-processed foods make me feel like I'm going on the prowl. And on the prowl means that I'm standing in front of my cupboard and looking for things to eat. It means that I'm eating when I'm not hungry. It means that I might be going to the drive-through at a local fast food establishment and getting a lot of food that I don't need. It might mean eating copious amounts of junk food. And it really is about not being able to control myself around those ultra-processed foods of the standard American diet.
All right, give us an example of your go-tos, because when I was still really struggling with my weight and in the throes of the worst of my addiction, like it was always the same food day in and day out. Did you gravitate to the same thing every day as well?
Yes, the same thing would be salt, oil, sugar.
Right, okay,
So really my go-to would be potato chips, pizza, and peanut butter cups. And I always say I'm one potato chip away from failure, I'm one piece of pizza away from failure, I'm one peanut butter cup away from failure.
Yeah.
But those are very specific foods that I'd be drawn to. But if they weren't available, it might be something else. It might be ice cream, it might be hamburgers, it might be anything with copious amounts of salt, oil, sugar.
Now, did you struggle with one more than another? Because in retrospect, it was very clear to me that I was an oil and salt guy.
I'm an oil and salt person, and one of my followers in social media noticed that I was one of the women that was not necessarily the sweet route, and that's very true. My pattern would be the salt and oil route and savory foods first. Probably.
Absolutely. It's like when I give my presentation and I talk about getting the free empanada from Taco Bell, just because they love me keeping them in business. It's like I couldn't care less about that empanada. It was like it was all about give me the burritos, give me the salt, give me the fat from the beef and the sour cream and all of that. I just could not get enough. When you would open a bag of potato chips, there's that famous phrase, but you can't eat just one.
No, well, a bag of potato chips was essentially one potato chip, right? I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about the potato chips until the bag was gone.
Yeah.
It truly, that is the nature of what I struggled with.
Did you have a particular brand? Do you want to name drop them?
I don't name drop brands because I don't want to get in trouble with any particular brands.
Oh, wow.
Sour cream and onion, nacho cheese, you name
Didn't
it.
discriminate. We're just, okay.
Chip dip with potato chips.
Yeah.
It's all part of it.
I got you. So when did you realize that your eating patterns were kind of getting out of control and abnormal, even for the standard American diet?
I think I knew it subconsciously a lot longer than I knew it consciously. I tried to get a hold of my weight in 2009, and I found the plant-based world at that point. I implemented it. I lost weight quickly, and I was successful, but there were two things that got in my way. One was that I was having cheat days, and thought that it would be okay to do that. And when I would have one of those days, I would get off, and then it would be one meal turns into one day, which turns into one weekend, which turns into 1 week. And so I didn't understand enough about my hunger drive to be able to override that. And so that was part of it. But the other thing I didn't understand at that point too was the cycle of binge eating in myself, as well as the cycle of exercises that I was doing that were serving as exercise purges. And so I was going through very restrictive eating patterns that would lead to binge eating as well. So I really say that the journey to eat when hungry in this society for me has been one of the most complex processes of my life.
Yeah.
And it has required some of the most multifaceted understanding of myself in order to wade through it, to lose between 140 and 150 pounds and to maintain that weight loss, and to be confident that I know what my action plan is now if I struggle.
I want to go back to what it was you were talking about with the exercise. What did you call it? Exercise purge, exercise
Yes.
binge? Okay.
Yep.
What do you mean by that?
So one of the really interesting things that I've learned in my journey comes out of the work of Dr. Shan Geisinger, and she talks about it's about being able. It's about exercise serving as this is where it gets really hard to explain, but you can trigger anorexia by losing a big amount of weight fairly quickly. I think she uses the term 15%. And so what happened is that I would exercise and I would trigger this adaptation in my brain and my body that would allow me to go longer periods of time without eating and being restrictive. And I had a series of distortions that were part of that, that made it possible for me to go longer periods of time and to get wrapped up in not eating as a mechanism for survival. That's what her theory goes. And Dr. Doug Lyle helped me figure that part out. And so what happened is I was restricting for long periods of time and losing weight very, very quickly, but I wasn't getting enough calories. And then I would have these breakthrough binge cycles, and I was prone to binging. And I was prone to binging large amounts. And so these cycles were like incredible peaks and valleys. And I talk now about trying to live in the rolling hills around my hunger drive.
Right.
And so I've had to cut off the peaks and the valleys of overly restrictive eating and then extraordinary binge eating.
So when you talk about the binges during those cycles, are we talking about binging on the unhealthy foods, or were you gorging on, because you said you were doing a plant-based diet at that point, just like mass quantities of everything that was plant-based?
It was in 2009, it was a combination of both.
Okay.
And so if I were in more of a good space, it would be some of the unhealthy pieces of the plant-based living that I know that I probably shouldn't have. In the worst case scenario, I was going back to everything of the standard American diet and creating this just really cycle that was full of extreme ups and downs.
Did anybody express any concern to you as you were going through that crazy roller coaster with the peaks and valleys going up and down and up and down and up and down? Because I know when I would lose weight and then boom, it would just come back on. That was just when, the friends would express concern to the point where at one point they organized an intervention for me.
Well, I don't know that in 2009 when I did it, I wasn't necessarily showing it so dramatically because I would have a massive binge and then I would go into that restrictive cycle
Gotcha.
again. So it wasn't visible, but when I fell off in 2009, I went up the scale very quickly once I stopped the restrictive piece. And then I gained everything that I had lost and then some. And then I was in a state of morbid obesity for essentially 10 years and feeling, to go back to your previous question, more and more out of control during that time.
Let me ask you this question. I don't think I've ever asked a fellow food addict to describe the feeling of when they fell off the wagon, what that first bite of that, whatever that treat would have been, what that felt like for you, because I remember that feeling distinctly, but I'm very curious what that experience was like for you.
I've never been asked that either. I mean, I think there's a sense of relief. There's a sense of giving in. There's a sense of just release to be going into the instinct. I would say that from the outside, I think one part of how I've reframed my perspective is that then I would have thought it was giving into something that was joy. Now I don't see that it is a joyful thing, but it's a feeling of abandon. As I entered into that stage of controlling myself to giving into the instinct, it would be a very, primal fall into it, and it would be it's something that I would just lose myself in it.
Yeah.
And it's not a joyful experience, even though that's how I think it's perceived in society sometimes.
For me, it was just the biggest bag of mixed emotions you could possibly imagine. There was that sense of relief. It was almost like a pressure relief valve was, released, and it was psh, you just feel like all that steam come out. But at the same time, as that steam's being released, it's like totally morally deflating because you know, like, crap, here I go again, because you've been there before. You know what the ramification, more than likely, will wind up being. And it's just like, why can't I get a hold of this? And again, coupled with that release, and it's just like, I don't know, it was like a tsunami of happiness followed by like despair at the same time. It was very quickly, it's like big bang.
It is very
quickly. Oh
quickly.
my God.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would say the same. It goes very, very quickly, but the first part for me is, like we would talk about, is it lands more positive in terms of the relief and just that release, and then it becomes part of the regret and the shame and the self-beratement and I hated the fact that I couldn't get a hold of this problem in my life. And I often say that I didn't hate myself, but I hated this problem in my life.
And I wonder also if for a lot of people, they continue to go back to those foods and they don't get back on the wagon. One, because it's really hard, but two, like, it's a way of punishing themselves, right? Because it's like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough to conquer these demons, so I'm just gonna give in, I'm gonna do what's bad for me because I don't deserve to be healthy. So it's like self-loathing and punishment. It's, and that's kind of the way that I looked at it too. It's like, well, forget you, Chuck, go to Taco Bell, you're a big fat failure. And that's what it felt like.
Well, and I always kept postponing change. I lived in enough hope to say to myself, I'll start tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I lived in the resignation of the moment, thinking that I probably wouldn't, and knowing that those were empty words in my life.
Yeah. I knew starting tomorrow was just, it was a line I was telling myself, We're very good at lying to ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, I think my whole weight loss journey is caught up in uprooting distortions.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many distortions in my thinking around it. I can justify a binge if I want to, but I also can perceive that I'm overeating when I'm not sometimes. And then when I was very large, I also could convince myself that it really wasn't that bad. And then one of the defining moments was seeing a picture of myself, and it was that bad.
Yeah.
And I had to come to terms with that picture of myself, with the idea that I was going to lose the rest of my life to this food addiction.
I'm glad that you explained that because I was wondering what you meant by distortions. And yeah, like that it is kind of a distorted, warped way of thinking. And as we were just talking about, like it's so easy to lie to yourself. You know it's a lie, but daggone if you didn't convince yourself of it at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
It's wild.
And that is why this journey is so incredibly complex in this world. The supernormal foods that surround us, these unhealthy foods that surround us, every place, wreak havoc on our body. They wreak havoc on our instincts. And some of us have more of these like binge cycles that are built into us than others. And discovering our hunger drives has universal things, I think, that are part of the experience, but also for me, there were individual pieces that there were certain foods that served as triggers for me that caused that feeling of going on the prowl, and really paying attention to that cause-effect sequence of how what I ate and how I felt has really helped me be able to uproot this for the long haul.
Let me ask you this. Those trigger foods, I even avoided the healthier versions of them when I first gravitated toward eating this way. And because I just always equated a burrito as being unhealthy because it's Taco Bell, I wanted nothing to do with that. There are phenomenally healthy, delicious, nutritious burritos out there. And I wouldn't even eat so much as like a vegetable and hummus wrap because it was wrapped in a tortilla because I was worried that would trigger me.
Yeah.
So you said that your jam was potato chips and pizza and peanut butter cups. There are healthy versions of each of those out there. Have you sampled them? How do you do with them?
I have, but I find that I do best on a very simple diet. I do best without a lot of seasonings. I do best not trying to replace the foods, but focusing on very simple foods. Now, that being said, I'm less fearful about having some of those foods now than I was when I first even started telling my story publicly, because I understand the process of going in and out of eating those foods. And when I can understand the process and the agitation that they cause and the way out of that agitation, it makes it so much easier. So I have what I call textbook days. And then part of my failure plan is how do I work myself out of a non-textbook day or a day of failure to a textbook day. And some people don't want to call it failure. I don't have a problem calling it failure because that has been a form of empowerment for me, because truly when I eat, if I have one binge, it feels like a failure.
Gotcha.
So I don't have a problem saying that. However, people need to name it for themselves.
Whatever works for you.
Absolutely. But I then take myself, I don't try to be the best of myself as I work myself out, and I stair step it out so that I don't go from like the worst of myself to the best of myself, because I have failed so many times in that back and forth.
Deep question. Do you feel like having a failure plan, do you feel like you need that because inevitably you're going to slip up again, you're going to have another binge, and that's kind of like your reality? But then also, do you feel like it kind of gives you permission to have that binge again?
Oh, no, it doesn't give me permission to have that binge. And I've really taken when I talk about living in the rolling hills and taking those peaks and valleys off, I have taken those peaks and valleys off, but there's going to be some way that we're fallible as humans. We're going to fail. There are days where I don't have the right foods in the refrigerator. There are days when I eat out for convenience, and as hard as I try, I may get salt, oil, sugar in the meal. There are days when I do eat more than other days, but I am not binging like I used to, these colossal giant binges. But in some way, I'm not going to meet my expectations. And so having a plan to do that, I've also then got a series of replacement foods that make me feel like I'm not living in a land of restriction, but that keep me from the worst of myself.
What are some of those foods?
Well, potatoes would be one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't eat potatoes on a regular basis because I can overeat potatoes. And I know they're part of programs and that sort of thing. My personal hunger drive is just like potato chips were a failure. I could eat a lot of potatoes and then get rid of all of the vegetables. And then I don't feel very good. But I might have potatoes in vulnerable times, like special occasions or going out to eat. One of the reasons why I enjoyed breakfast here today so much is because potatoes were in it. And they're not going to cause me to veer dramatically off course.
Right.
But this is an individual thing that I've discovered, and for other people it might be something else. But that's why I encourage people to really get in touch with their own hunger drives and to think about foods that cause them peace and foods that cause them agitation.
Let's talk about when you first went plant-based. I think you said 2009.
Yeah.
And then it didn't go according to plan,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And then, you had another decade of struggles. So
Yeah.
what did you learn in that space? Because there are a lot of people who we do hear from who say, I tried this once, it didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But very few kind of circle back and had success the
Yeah.
way that you have. What did you learn over that decade?
That's a great question. I learned, I learned to uproot the myth of moderation in myself.
Yeah.
I tried to live according to moderation over and over again. It didn't work. And then the other thing that happened is that I was an educator working in district leadership at the time, and I was doing research for our community around perfectionism to share ideas around perfectionism and how it impacted learning. And I got into the all or nothing thinking, and I thought, this is who I am around my food journey. If I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it at all. Or if I'm not going to do it according to textbook, then I'm just going to throw in the towel. And Dr. Doug Lyle calls this the ego trap, where we set the expectations too high for ourselves, and so we go on strike not to not to meet them. And that's what I was doing over and over and over again in my journey. And so I realized that I had to come up with a way to not view this journey as an all or nothing thing. And there are so many different ways that has shaped my journey as I figured out success for myself, but always trying to avoid that all or nothing thinking.
So what advice would you have for somebody who is skeptical of trying it again because they've tried every diet known to man, including plant-based, and it just seems like nothing works? What would you say to that person?
I would say not to give up and to take it in smaller steps, because they might be trying to make too big of changes all at once. And I always say to myself, I'm going to string together more successes than failures as a way to help me navigate that all or nothing thinking. So that would be part of it. And then the other thing I would tell people is to really look at themselves from the inside out and try to feel the changes that they have if they avoid the ultra-processed foods. And the more that I could feel in myself around the actions and the choices I was making, the better I am to intervene in those. And so that has really led to a lot of success for me.
And I think one of the things that really strikes me with you also is, as you were talking about, you're very comfortable using the word failure, and you've had your failure plan, which means that your plan is very individualized, and I think everybody's different. We've had this debate on the show before as well. Is it better to baby step your way toward this, or are you just going to cannonball it in the deep end? And I think it just depends on the person. It absolutely depends on the person.
Absolutely. And in order to succeed, I had to do what felt like a cannonball of a change. I really did. I thought I was moving into a very restrictive way of navigating my change when I got that first step into my current success. It turns out I have made numerous changes to tighten things up since then. And if I went back to the way I was when I started a second time in earnest to succeed, if I went back to that, I probably wouldn't still be successful, because there were a lot of things I didn't understand about my hunger drive then, and that I really discovered with really intentional experimentation around making changes and then feeling them. Always looking for the hopeful part of this is satiation. And satiation I describe as a sensuality of wellness, because it permeates every aspect of my life. And so when I eat the foods that are really healthy and that create peace in me, I get that sensuality of wellness, which is a very hopeful, wonderful place to live. And I didn't know that even at the beginning of my second start. So it really takes time, and to take the time to do it, and you might need to do a cannonball, but then you might need to take small steps too.
It's funny, I used to think that I cannonballed it too, but the way that I wound up here is very much like you described. If I go back to what my diet was when I first went plant-based, it's like I've evolved so much
Yes.
since then. And so the cannonball was just eliminating all, meat and dairy
Yeah.
from the diet.
Yeah.
And then, great, did that overnight. But then getting here, that was a longer process. And you learn more and more over time.
Absolutely.
And you feel better over time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I encourage people to do is that they have to be the hero of their own journey.
Yeah.
Because no one can make these changes for you. And so finding your power is really about understanding yourself.
So I like the phrase that you use, and use this in your series with Doug Lyle, as a matter of fact. I think eat when hungry, right?
Yes.
Eat
Yes.
when hungry. So what is your eating schedule like? Are you regimented? I'm going to eat breakfast at 9, I'm going to eat breakfast at noon, I'm going to eat breakfast or dinner at 5, and that's it. But that doesn't seem like that's what you do. So you just, if you're hungry, you're going to eat. If you're not hungry, you're not going to eat. How does this work?
That's the ideal.
Okay.
I don't always live in the ideal.
Right.
I live in the human. And,
Right. I live in the human. I like that. Okay.
Which is a zone of fallibility as well as triumph.
Yeah.
And so it's really about the ideal of what it means to eat when hungry. I know what my textbook days are. I see eat when hungry as a fluid question, and it's one I answer for myself differently at different times. We're at a conference right now. Eating at a conference it's very wonderful because there's foods here that I would not eat on a daily basis.
Right.
But I would probably get in trouble if I had these in my home on a daily basis because I would overeat them then too.
So you were just talking about the potatoes. I mean,
yes.
Easy to do.
Easy to do. So eat when hungry is fluid, and it depends on whether there's a special occasion. It depends on my schedule for the day. It really is, for me, about trying to avoid that agitation and eating to satiation.
That's a difficult thing to do. But I guess my question in its most simple form is, if you wake up one morning at home on a regular day and you're not hungry for breakfast, do you just skip it?
Then I don't eat it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing for lunch, same thing, you know. It's like, if I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat.
2 meals,
That'll
3.
do. Yeah, whatever.
I time it according to my hunger drive in an ideal world.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Is there an absolute time at night where you're like, it's just too late, even if you get like a hungries at 9, 10 o'clock?
I try not to eat then, but I can't say that I've done that 100% either.
Neither can I.
But I do try to, because I know the science and research is on that it's better to eat heavier earlier in the day.
Somewhat of an unfair question, but I want to ask you this, because I had this feeling like when I began eating this way, like finally I had found the answer, and here we are 15, into the vegan thing, like we're like 8.5, 9 years in now. But I felt like this time was different, and it just felt different, and you just knew. And do you have that feeling with this go around?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think that's why I can share my numbers now, is because the numbers don't feel like they're essential in my success anymore.
We haven't gotten the numbers.
I?
No, we have not given the tail of the tape, no.
Okay, I've lost between 140 and 150 pounds, and I was very worried about reaching the number of 300. I did not have a weight for my highest weight because I was afraid of it, and I knew that it was very, very high.
Yeah.
And fear and being fed up with myself is really what led me to making the change and wanting a different way of living. So that's my highest known weight is 285. I probably was over 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Those numbers, again, my action plan isn't around the numbers, it's around the food.
Yeah, if I wasn't gonna have surgery, like there's no way I would have ever known my top weight either. I hated the scale.
Yeah.
I was too heavy for like the vast majority of home scales. Like I think they maybe max out at 300. I was well beyond that. But so I completely understand your psychology there. I want to hear about this 10-episode series that you did with Dr. Lyle.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So I've created this Venn diagram of what it means to eat when hungry to illustrate what a complex process it is. And in the center of the Venn diagram is Eat When Hungry. And there really is, this series is about detailing the complexity of making a lifestyle change and digging in deep to some of those nuances that for me have made the difference between success and failure. And the things that I needed to understand, some of which are reflected in the larger conversations, and some of which maybe I never saw reflected in the larger conversations. And so we have 10 episodes with an 11th in the planning.
Yeah.
And we're just slowly telling my story around that Venn diagram with the idea of Eat When Hungry in the center. And there's a big circle that encompasses everything around knowing myself and actions and that I need to take, that are general things about how to handle social situations, knowing myself, those types of things. And then there's another part of the Venn diagram that is about understanding the addictive foods and the pleasure trap in modern society. And then there's another one about understanding foods and wellness. There's another one, a circle around it that's about understanding weight genetics and some of those things that are part of our biology. And then there's about social identity and myself, and all of that is part of the Venn diagram, and they're all overlapping. But you can see from just even hearing that it's a very comprehensive look at what it means to eat when hungry in this society and how wide it really is, which is, I think, why so many people fail at this journey, including myself, for decades.
I've got to take a look at this Venn diagram. I think it's like if we could just encapsulate it somehow, like all the complexities, I think that people who are out there struggling like you did, like I did, like it would really resonate with them. Like, oh my God, she gets it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've had a number of people contact me who have printed it off, and it needs some polishing up right now, but now that I've had it out there for a couple years without being edited, it needs cleaning up a little bit and probably becoming more professional.
Yeah. Final question, because I neglected to ask you this as well. Just for a little bit more context, obviously your weight was really high. Were you having any sort of health issues in addition to obesity?
Well, yes, I keep a lot of that private, but I was,
we don't have to dive into it.
Yeah, but I mean, I talk about it conceptually. I was fearful in the middle of the night what I was doing to myself. I was, worried about heart problems, about cancer, about diabetes, all of the lifestyle changes. My world was shrinking as my waistline was expanding, and I felt like I was missing out on a lot of opportunities. And so really, it was really health and wellness was driving part of it, but also just wanting things in my life that were different than what I was experiencing. And I just remember the pain of moving. And I was starting to have trouble tying my shoes or cutting my toenails, those types of things. And my clothes were tight. I was going to need to go up another size. I didn't want to do that. And so I really, really wanted to figure out how to get control of this problem in my life.
How sweet is it to have your life back?
It's amazing. It's hard not to regret not getting a hold of it earlier, but the reason why I've centered my story is hopefully to help others understand some of those, as Dr. Lyon calls them, clues to success.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chuck.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's very clear that you've been through the thick of it, but you're sharing a lot of wisdom that's going to help a lot of people. For that,
I hope so. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.